Hello, everyone. My name is Alicia Crank, and welcome to Northwest Washington Civic Circle's Candidate Connect. I am the founder, and it's the first time we've done this type of series before. And the goal of it is to be able to have one-on-one conversations with those who are running for local office here in Edmonds to get to know the human side of them, because we know that they're going to be peppered with all kinds of questions and facts and figures. And sometimes, especially in trying times like this, it can be hard to remember that there is an actual person behind the public figure that is looking to run for office. So our first person that we have up for this series is Alex Newman. And Alex is running for Edmonds City Council Position 3. Alex, welcome.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. All right, the floor is yours for the next 2 minutes. Tell us who you are.
Sure thing. Well, I'm Alex Newman. I'm running for Edmonds City Council Position 3. This is my first time as a candidate for any office. When I'm not running for this office, I am out there working as the executive director for the American Red Cross in Northwest Washington. And I am a relatively new Edmonds resident, as you might be able to tell from a couple of things about me. But I've moved around a lot as a kid in my life because I lived with some economic insecurity as I was growing up. We moved around quite a bit to the different areas that my family could get a job. And what took us to whatever the specific place was going to be in the area that we could get a job was, what is the area that has safe neighborhoods? What's the area that has really high quality public education? And what is the area that has respect and reverence for our environment? And so now that I'm in a stage of my life where I finally get to choose where I get to live in my stage of my career, I am really, really grateful to be able to live here in Edmonds. I've fallen in love with it so quickly for those reasons, and this is what I am so proud to call home now. For those reasons, I am also focused in this campaign on public safety, on affordability, and on environmental protection. I know we'll have an opportunity to talk about those things more, so I won't go too much into that now. But, aside from that, I'm an immigrant, I'm a reader, I'm a humanitarian, I am a lifelong learner, a lover of parks, nature, as you might be able to tell. And I'm just someone who loves meeting new people, learning from people who I agree with, who I disagree with, and having really good conversations. So really appreciative for this time today, Alicia.
Thank you. So I'm picking up an accent.
That's right.
Tell us more.
Yeah, English originally. I was born in Leicester, England, a working class town in the East Midlands. My family's all English, but we moved to the US when I was still a baby, really. So I moved around quite a lot as a little kid, as I said, because it depended on where we could find a job that would stick for a little while with my family. And I'm so grateful for what my parents did in coming over here and giving me the opportunities that they didn't have in working class England, to be able to go to really good public schools, to be able to go to college, be the first in my family to get a 4-year degree. My dad did do night school, which I'm very proud of him for, of course, and got his bachelor's. But and then I had the opportunity to, ironically, go back to England to get my graduate degree. And that's something I never would have been able to do had my family not moved to the US, ironically.
So the requisite question for anyone that runs in Edmonds: how long have you lived here?
Yeah, coming up about 2 years. Like I said, a relative newcomer, but this is where I want to be for the same reasons that I loved, that drew my family to different places growing up. This has everything that I want in a little community that I want to be able to raise kids here. I want to be able to make my life here.
So why city council and why now? And let me kind of couch that with, I think since 2019, the councils that have come in have faced some major challenges. So those that were voted on in 2019, that came in 2020, got hit with the pandemic.
Right.
Then the ones that came in right after that, kind of dealing with the repercussions of that, and still to where we are today, with a lot of the financial stuff, which I will bring up later on in this conversation. With so much kind of stressful things happening, why city council right now? Why not, oh, let me do a board or commission first? Why jump straight into council?
Yeah, well, it's the reason that I got activated to do this was it's what we see at the national level of all of the division, all of the taking the opportunities to slice and burn every program that people can find at the national level. And I see that affecting what people are doing locally. When I saw that there was the proposal to sell off the parks locally to try to account for the budget shortfall that we had, I knew that was a horrible idea immediately. There is taking the opportunity of a budget crisis to impose an agenda of slash and burn government is not something that I can stand for. So I really wanted to make sure that there is somebody in this race who is going to be preserving our parks, who is going to be preserving our public services, and making sure that we are raising revenues in responsible ways to do that instead of just trying to slash everything.
But were there any other avenues that you were looking at first? Or was it like, I want to be kind of in this very elected position right now?
Yeah, I mean, the number of opportunities to get involved in that because of the budget crisis shrank so much. So many of the commissions that exist had to be just indefinitely paused. I mean, I think about the DEI commission. I think about multiple different groups around town that there just wasn't funding for, so they just got indefinitely shelved. And I think that those are things that are priorities to be able to stabilize government revenues and our outputs to be able to allow us to have services like that that are going to be really important and be able to develop a generation of people who are going to be able to lead the community and not just have to jump straight into city council races, right?
Right. And I know that I know what you mean by the now what's called the Edmonds Activated Group. I had a small hand in that naming. I didn't mean it, but I was just like, Edmonds is getting activated around what's going on with the parks and everything like that. And I just saw the group kind of come together and blow up. So thanks, Christine. Yeah. So a lot of people I feel like got activated around that, right? Because when you talk about public assets like a park or something, like, oh my God, wait, that affects everybody. It doesn't have a political leaning, right? We want to enjoy parks, we want to enjoy, our trees and nature in our community. What springboarded you from that? How did it go from I see this and now I want to jump to running for council? And I'm hitting on that because especially, and I'm somewhat, the first time I ran in Edmonds, I was here for 2 years too. So I imagine some of the stuff that you're getting right now. But a lot of that criticism was people don't know who you are yet. They haven't seen what you've been able to do. They haven't seen you maybe volunteer on some group, not necessarily a board or commission or some other group. And that was one of the community questions that came in is, what have you been able to do in the 2 years you've been here so far that you've engaged with the community ahead of this?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I mean, for me, it's been things like what I do through my work every day as I work with the American Red Cross. That involves a lot of community partnerships with first responders. That involves a lot of community partnerships with groups like Edmonds Prepares, organizations that are there to make sure that we have resilient communities when a disaster strikes is a really important piece of what I want to be able to bring to council as well. That on top of being the board member at the Emergency Food and Sheltering Program for Snohomish County. I've been a big brother with Big Brothers Big Sisters Snohomish County. So different ways that I really like to jump in that way, both directly through my job and tangential and just ways that I want to contribute.
Now, the other pesky question. Your job sounds like a very busy one for necessary reasons. Will it allow you to give the amount of time needed to be what some would consider a successful council member?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I am someone who likes to keep really busy. My job is wonderful. I love my day job. That doesn't mean that I need to be doing my day job all day and all night, right? I have the opportunity to be able to run for this position. I wouldn't be running for it if I didn't know that I could give it my all as well.
Noted. All right, we're going to jump into your website for a second, right. Or for more. There's some questions I wanted to ask you, and some of these questions actually came to from some of our community members that emailed in questions ahead of time. So again, Edmonds is for at least the city council positions are nonpartisan.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a saying that either people love or people hate, which is I say an office can be nonpartisan, but a person cannot be. We all have our own experiences and upbringings that lead us to decide things the way that we want to. But that being said, we're going to look at some of your endorsements so far. And of course, a lot of people are like that are not Democrats or want to keep it nonpartisan are saying you have a lot of Democratic endorsements here for a nonpartisan role. How do you speak to those who would see this and feel turned off and feel like this makes you out to be ultra partisan because you went after these endorsements?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I'm not shy about the fact that personally I'm a Democrat. That's where my values lie. That is how I believe that we need to be serving people, is through strong public services and making sure that we are paying attention to not just the loudest voices, but those most vulnerable in the community. That's what being a Democrat means to me. And I believe that those are values that are really in line with what the people of Edmonds believe. It is totally right that the office is nonpartisan. And what that means to me is that as a city councillor, I'm not going to be told what to do by the Democratic Party locally or at any level. I'm not going to be caucusing with the people on the council who also are Democrats. It's an approach to show the values that I have. The values that I have are in alignment with organizations like Alliance for Gun Responsibility, with Planned Parenthood Alliance Advocates, with Fair Vote Washington, with Washington Conservation Action, especially. And I just want people to know. I think that it's so hard at the local level to understand what somebody stands for, and things like this let someone know that they're not just talking the talk. They have a proven track record of standing for these values. And at the end of the day, if you look at these groups and you don't like them, that's totally okay. I want you to know that I might not be your guy. I want to be as transparent as possible and make you have an informed decision.
Okay. Then we want to go through, you did talk a little bit already about your backgrounds. I just want to kind of leave this here for people to look at for a second, your degrees and all that fun stuff and all the things you want to get done for Edmund. So, and also too, if people are watching live right now on either YouTube or the Alicia and Edmonds Facebook page, you should be able to make comments. And if you can make a comment in the comment section, I should be able to see it. So if you want to test that out, you can. If you want to try to throw in a question, you can, and I will try to get to it should the conversation and time permits. So next, I want to, again, going back into what your vision is for Edmonds, and you have 4 different areas here. And so I'm going to ask you to give kind of what I'm calling a tangible example of what these are. And again, thinking about this from kind of the layperson's terms, like what is the example that you can give around what does affordability mean to you when you say you're committed to diverse housing solutions? Tell us more about that. What does that in your mind mean?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of a young person who is also, pretty far up in my field at this point. As I said, I'm an executive director. And I moved to Edmonds, and I find that the housing market here is so tight, is so unaffordable, that I could only afford to live in Edmonds because I was able to find another young man who was looking for a roommate at the same time to share a 500 square foot apartment.
Ouch.
That is how unaffordable Edmonds has become. And that is not a way to encourage the next generations to be able to make Edmonds their home. So what that actually means now is that I support the initiatives around the hubs model for the community. This is the model that basically says, hey, downtown Edmonds, the Edmonds Bowl, is beautiful and pretty much as close to perfect as you're going to get. I don't think that we should be making a ton of changes down in downtown Edmonds because it's got a thriving business center, it's got walkable neighborhoods, it's got all the things that make people want to live there. What it's got also is the highest amount of housing diversity in our entire city, which means that there are the combination of single family homes, of small walkable condo buildings, of duplexes, the townhouses, those different styles of buildings, that is what make the Bowl such an attractive place to live. So what I like to see is communities like what they're doing out in the Perrinville area and even in the Five Corners area to an extent, where you have these business hubs that people can walk to, that people can enjoy locally, that are bringing in new revenue for the town, that also allows us to have a gradient of housing options out from them. So you have some townhouses, maybe very small condo buildings in the immediate vicinity of those hubs, and then you have a gradient out towards single family homes again. So those areas allow people to walk to where they want to get their services, to where they want to get their groceries, and it allows for there to be different types of housing that makes the market more affordable for people like myself or people who are seniors on fixed incomes. I mean, I've spoken to so many seniors when I've knocked on their doors who have said, I'm trying to downsize. You know, a lot of them are in split level homes that are dangerous for people as they age. And they want to downsize, but they can't find anywhere within Edmonds to do it. So having different housing options like that is really important for people to maintain their communities and to be able to have options that they can afford.
I want to go back to what you mentioned, the hubs. Mm-hmm. And I am curious to know what your thoughts are around one particular hub. I always butcher the name of it, but it's the one that's right off the Bowl, so right at Puget Drive and Olympic View Drive. And how do you balance at times affordability versus public safety, for example? Because I live at the bottom, I live at the top of that hill when you're coming down. And, you know, it's a very funky already kind of 3-turn situation. Yeah. And so, and there's a school right there and a park. And I think I want to say like a month ago, I was driving through there and there was like a car accident at that intersection because someone was trying to beat the light situation.
Yeah.
And so it had been suggested that that be an area for increased density. Some are not feeling that way. What are your thoughts on that particular area?
Yeah, I mean, I think that areas like that, any area that we're trying to increase density in, has to be accompanied with really intentional location planning and having the public infrastructure planning that's necessary too, i.e. we've got to have effective sidewalks, effective signage, effective, you know, those blinkers that come on when people are going across major roads so that people know that they're there, especially given that that area is so near to a school. That is really important to have effective and well-maintained sidewalks and public spaces there. So I think that that whole intersection could use a lot of reworking. It would be a lot safer if instead of it coming at, you know, it's like that. And as you said, comes to that V, right? If that came to a T, that would be a lot safer for everybody and make it like a normal intersection. So I think
I'm personally angling for a green turn arrow.
Yeah, right, right.
I'm told it's in the works. I'm told it costs millions of dollars for whatever reason. But we
need to get new quotes for that if they're saying millions of dollars for a green turn arrow. But yeah,
it's silly. Okay, environment. Talk more about that. What do you see in this area that you want to make sure that to ensure that the Edmonds we love remains vibrant? Yeah. And I'm sure that came from the tree and everything else that happened.
Yeah. So, I mean, I see what happens in my work every day when we don't take climate seriously, when we don't take preserving the environment and preparing our environment seriously for what's ahead. In the last 12 months, I've been to called out to serve on several major disasters across the country, be that Hurricane Helene or that was the LA wildfires in January. We think that these things don't affect urban areas, and I am here to tell you they absolutely do. So those are climate-driven disasters that are especially damaging communities that do not take the opportunity when they have it to prepare. So what that means that Edmonds needs to be doing is making sure that we are reducing our carbon footprint where we can, making sure that we are preserving our green spaces that are sequestering carbon, that are public services, that are actually there as incredible buffers to seawater, to different climate threats that come up. And then making sure that we have resiliency plans in place. What that means is having full-time emergency manager. Right now, because of the budget crisis, we have our entire emergency management department shrunk down to one person who is also a uniformed police officer. And that person is doing as good a job as any one person can be. Serious respect to that person, but that is not setting someone up or a city up for success. So we need to make sure that we have comprehensive emergency management plans for climate disasters.
Alex, I'm gonna put you on the spot for a second.
Please.
How does this look? I think most of the time when we hear about environment and climate and preserving our parks and green spaces, there's a default to the bowl, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you live in an area of town, like I used to live in an area of town. It didn't have as much green space, so there wasn't a lot of environment focus, around Highway 99.
Right.
How does what you're thinking about doing and wanting to implement, how will it impact those that are on the south end of Edmonds?
Yeah, I mean, I want to see more dedicated green spaces wherever possible. I mean, these are spaces that are there to be able to attract people, make the communities more attractive for people, that are huge in increasing public safety, even because people buy into community and public spaces that make everybody care about them. They make everybody want to make sure that we're not littering. That makes everybody want to make sure we're not engaging in risky behaviors in public, because we have community buy-in around our green spaces. So I want to see more green spaces in different areas of town. And I want to see different pieces of the existing green spaces preserved that can be built off of. I'm a huge supporter of the recent last few months, I should say, city code that preserved trees over 30 inches in diameter. Things like that go a long way to making sure that we are keeping spaces not in all areas of our community green for the foreseeable future.
Okay. Financial responsibility. This is what's on the tip of everyone's tongues right now.
Oh yeah.
Give us an example, and as someone who's also in nonprofit leadership, I tell you what you mean. Know what you mean by it. Taught you how to maximize limited resources and do a lot with a little. So, how do you envision being able to apply that in this nonprofit space of just city government and trying to make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, we see what happens when people try to run governments like businesses. I mean, it's what's happening nationally right now. If it's not focused around providing public services for everybody, it's focused on slashing and burning. So I am a big advocate for the way out of this budget crisis is not to continue to slash and burn, it's to raise revenues in new ways. I know that we'll have an opportunity to talk about some specifics of that in a minute. But it's going to be making sure that we are standing and making decisions about budgets with our values to make sure that we are allowing for these programs that are going to serve people who need it most. The fact that our human services department shrunk enormously over the last few years really concerns me, and make sure that more people are going to end up in teetering positions in poverty in our community, because we think if we can't see it, it's not real. Well, it's there, and the more we cut these programs back, the more we're about to see it. So it's really important that we are funding the right things and doing so responsibly. I have that experience of raising limited funds to be able to serve people who need it and be able to make public services for everybody. So that's what I think is most important as we start talking about financial responsibility.
And we're going to talk about raising funds in just a minute. So,
yeah.
I'm going to try not to get ahead of myself. And in public safety, and, I'm probably sure that you heard about what happened over the past 24 hours with the fake officer the fake Edmonds officer that was trying to arrest people and showed up at a scene of a crime and got arrested. Like, public safety is such a huge topic, and I think people don't realize that it's not just necessarily about police officers arresting people or writing parking tickets or everything that's in between. When you talk public safety, I know that you specifically mentioned stronger emergency preparedness.
Mm-hmm.
And especially from someone coming from the Red Cross, that makes sense. But talk more specifically around what that means to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what a lot of people neglect is, as you mentioned, those areas in between each of those things. Is it important to have people who are, arresting bad guys? Absolutely. And the budget crisis has put us in a spot where we've had to, as a city, lay off a huge number of police officers too. So this is not, there's no comprehensive plan right now with the budget situation that we're in to be able to maintain services as they are as it relates to public services, or as it relates to public safety. What we're going to be needing to do is make sure that we also have violence interruption services that start at the school age level. These are things that I have really personal connections to, because my little brother did live through a school shooting at his high school. And that is something that I think that my generation of people and younger understand is a very real threat every day in schools. And it's true in schools, it's true in parks, it's true in public spaces, it's true wherever, that if we don't address the underlying issues for these kids, for young adults, for people of any age, issues of poverty, issues of homelessness, issues of domestic violence, issues of all manner of mental health problems, that is shooting ourselves in the foot when we are trying to talk about comprehensive public safety. Because the best way to make sure we have public safety is to make sure that these violent things just aren't happening in the first place.
Have you, especially when you talk about the school resource officers, have you had any conversations with current or former school board members around that topic?
I have, yeah. I was talking this weekend with some, actually. The school resource officers are tricky. I'm honestly of two minds about that. I really do support the approaches that the school board is taking as it relates to making sure that we have really comprehensive school counselors, making sure that we have violence interruption services, making sure that we have a lot of different ways that people are checking in with students before something happens, and wraparound community services that start at the school level. That is really essential, and I really commend that. And also, I know that there are a lot of communities in Edmonds that if they go to school and there are police officers stationed there, that doesn't make it a place where they're more likely to show up to school. So I do see both sides of that issue. I really, that's something that I grapple with, honestly. It wouldn't be my call as a city councillor as it relates to school resource officers. I would like to continue to, hear more on both sides of it as it relates to the school resource officers specifically.
Duly noted. All right, let's go on to the fun topic. Woohoo! So this is a two-part question. It's slightly tricky, so we'll see if you'll pass it. Two parts. Part one is, how would you describe the levy lid lift to the average person that hasn't been following any of this? They walk up to you, they know you're running for office, and they're like, what the heck is a levy lid lift? So that's part one. And then part two is, what is your stance on it and why?
Yeah, that's great. So first of all, the levy lid lift, Washington State has a unique tax system. We know that already we don't have income tax, so there's different tax bases for what we're able to raise revenues for at the local level as well as at the state level. So what that means for us is we have occasional opportunities and needs to propose to the voters a lift of the levy lid. The levy lid is the amount of money that we are allowed to raise through local property taxes for city services. This levy lid lift is proposed for public services, for public safety, and public lands. That means that because we have this $12 million budget gap that we are facing right now as a city, we need to raise money to be able to preserve our public safety efforts with our police department especially, and make sure that we are funding our public lands, that we are making sure that we have what it takes to maintain our public lands, and that we are not forced, or that the council is not forced to sell off lands, which I would do anything to fight. So what that's going to mean is that would be an increase to the monthly property tax rate. I believe it's about $67 for the median valued home in Edmonds. That's not insignificant. It is not something to take lightly to impose that on homeowners, especially in a place like Edmonds where there are a lot of people who are retired. I believe I answered your first part of that question. Yes? To your satisfaction up to this point? Okay. Yes. My stance on the levy, I am unapologetically pro-levy lid lift. I am going to be voting yes on the levy lid lift. And that's because I know that Edmonds is worth it. Because Edmonds is a place that we have to fund to make worth, to maintain what makes Edmonds the special place to live in that it is. It is going to be a cost, as any tax is, but what it's going to do is make sure that we're keeping our streets safe. It's going to make sure that we're keeping our parks open, and it's going to get us out of this crisis that we're in, that is making the current council have some really tough decisions. So I don't take it lightly. I hope that the campaign goes well, but something that I promise to you, Alicia, and to anybody watching is that if you ask me a question of what is my stance on this issue, I will tell you outright, and I am going to be voting yes.
Have you had an opportunity to look at like some of the neighboring cities that have also kind of looked at this? And I just incidentally, through another thing I was doing about a month or so ago, learned about the levy lid lift that they put on the ballot in Everett last year, and it failed.
Yeah.
And they thought it was relatively smaller than what we're trying to do. Are there any concerns about what, from your perspective, what might happen if this doesn't pass?
I mean, the threats are continued cuts to human services, continued cuts to police forces, and continued cuts that would place our parks on the chopping block. And I just can't fathom that happening. So it's not something that I enjoy, needing to support, but because the alternative is so severe, I 100% support it.
So I want to go back to something I said towards the beginning of this whole conversation around kind of like after pandemic on, there's been all this stuff, financially that's happening in the city, not just Edmonds, not just Washington State. Everyone's kind of getting hit by this. And I appreciated your last answer. That being said, it feels like from some of the comments I'm seeing online and some of the questions that came in, Edmonds is feeling very taxed.
Yeah.
Physically and mentally and physically, right? Because we got the RFA.
Right.
That just passed, and there's shenanigans with that right now. This potential levy lid lift, the cultural access sales tax, the public safety sales tax, and then now potentially the B&O tax and parking fees.
Yeah.
What do you say to your constituency that is listening or even maybe hearing all this at the same time for once and going, holy hell?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot of different things that are being proposed on there. When you look at the math of it, it takes a real combination to allow us to get out of this budget hole that we're in, that the way that the city has been run for the last 5-10 years has created this crisis. It's going to take a lot of different solutions. What I'm really concerned about is making sure that it's not just the levy that we're relying on. It's not just sales taxes that we're relying on, because those things are going to unduly burden specific groups of people. And I don't want to see that happen. The different ways that we can diversify revenue sources is going to mean that each of them can be lower, and different groups are going to be able to not be as burdened as heavily. So that's going to be a really important piece of it there. I also look at the comparative tax rates and how other cities near us are able to raise the money that they need to cover their operating expenses. And I find two really interesting things about that. One is that Edmonds has the average or lower than average effective tax rates. We have a lower effective tax rate than Linwood. That is a really surprising thing to me and to most people. What then it also brings me to is we need to be diversifying long term the types of revenues that we're getting, which means encouraging business growth in areas that aren't just the bowl of Edmonds. Mm-hmm. Because the bowl is doing fantastically, and I don't want to change what's happening in the bowl. Why go mess up a good thing? I want to see that replicated in different areas so that we have new businesses coming in and generating new revenue. There are some of those taxes that you mentioned that I support more than others. I like the cultural access tax, especially because that is something that is going to disproportionately affect people who are coming in to view and make the most of services of Edmonds, and it would be good for them to pay their fair share into it as well. The same goes for the parking fees. Those need to be strategically implemented so that residents of Edmonds will get their little tag that they can put on their car and be exempt from parking fees, so that we can make sure that we're raising that money from people who are using our services and making sure that they are paying for them from out of town.
How do you respond to the small business owners who are looking at all of these and going, dear Lord, right? It's like they're already feeling like they can't afford it. And just incidentally off the top of my head, I think about every time like a restaurant or something opens in the bowl in downtown Edmonds, they're like, oh, we wish we had something that was, more affordable. I wish we had a sandwich shop. And it's like that sandwich would be $25 if it's downtown, because overhead, right? Your lease amount is going to be different for 1,000 square feet place in downtown than it would on 99. But that being said, I mean, I think, and then there's a part of the downtown area too that has, oh God, what is that called? That they pay into their own. There's another fee.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about, right? So you already have that group that also has to pay into that. Yeah. Now potentially another thing. So how do we support and try to, bring in more of these small businesses, but also now look at all these potential tax situations that might be coming in? What do you say as the elected official in the city to say this is why you should still come and invest?
Yeah,
thank you. Business Improvement District bid.
Yeah. I mean, I say that we need to make sure that we're encouraging more business to come in and allowing that to happen through this hubs model, so that it doesn't just have to be downtown that's supporting all of that. If you have competing business real estate, well, that's going to affect the costs that business owners are paying, because there's going to be there's going to be a higher supply. So that's going to be a really nice thing there, and it's going to help drive down costs for people throughout the town as well. So I support that. And then those businesses there are an increasing number of businesses that we will be paying into it and reducing the debt burden for everybody. So making sure that we are growing our way out of the problem is going to be important. I think these short-term taxes are going to be, some of it is just stopping the bleeding that we're having right now. And then we need to make sure we have a vision for the long-term future that's going to make this solvent over the next 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years for this town.
What do you say to residents that are not in the bowl, the ones that are mid and South Edmonds, right? We talk about, and I have a budget financials of community assets here. Yeah. I will say the one thing that I was so happy about, that I noticed in kind of coming out of the pandemic, that there were some programs and services that came down there, right? There was the mini city hall that they did at that complex at 238th and 99, which has since been closed. They even did one of the summer market things over there, but it only lasted for one summer, and now that's gone again. Yeah. And so I'm bringing this up for a couple of reasons. One, I think that there's a subset in Edmonds that lives down there, and I still kind of consider myself a part of that, because that's where I spent most of my time in Edmonds before where I am right now, feeling like we're the step kids. Like, we don't get the assets, we don't get that reinvestment back into it. And maybe that's also why, and we talked about this earlier, kind of like the election returns, where certain precincts did not vote very highly, or percentage wise, and it tended to be that area as well, because maybe they feel checked out. What do you say to your constituents in that area to say, this is what I would want to do to bring something back into this. Because not only did they get it, then it was taken away again.
Right.
Almost without any explanation. It just went away.
Right.
And so I think some people felt like it was a little bit of a bait and switch thing, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's from one mayor to another mayor. So it wasn't just one administration per se, but it happened. And I think that it left a bad taste in some folks' mouth at that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And of course it does. And what I say to those people who are feeling that is, me too. I live between 5 corners and the 99. I am one of those people. And I think that the obvious answer to why we don't have that group of folks who live outside the bowl being as highly or densely represented is because they're not represented. It's because I'm running to be one of the only people not from those, super central areas in Edmonds. I think that what is going to set me apart is I am committing to doing really regular events in the areas that aren't just in the bowl. I'm still going to do those in the bowl, of course, because the city council seats are at large and you represent everybody. It can't just be in one area. We've got to make sure that we have representation across town, because that is what is going to make this place a place where people want to live regardless of which neighborhood. I think that's going to be a really important piece of it here, and I'm really proud to run to bring a perspective like that.
Yeah. And so how would you go about reaching those folks? So right now I have up the ballot return statistics. And I talked about this in another podcast a few weeks ago, where you see kind of that age breakdown, right?
Yeah.
So the older population comes out the strongest. And
Mm-hmm.
Edmonds in the entire county did have the highest turnout at 38% and some change, which is still low, but it's still high, right? But I think when you start to look at the 35 and unders for the most part, those are not majority bowl folks, right? And I remember being happy where I was living at, because it was kind of a gated community, so no one could come knocking on my door for any particular thing, until I ran and I was like, oh wait, that's bad now. So as someone who is in that younger demographic, so and I'm sure that those that are supporting you are kind of hoping that this helps activate those age groups to turn out and vote and just be a participant.
Yep.
How do you perceive, or how do you go about trying to reach that demographic? No, you can't reach them the same way that you would reach them down in the bowl. Like a lot of campaign events, down in the bowl, door knocking, doorbelling, down the bowl in the other areas. Can't necessarily do, or is either not happening, or you can't necessarily do that level of it in South Edmonds. How are you reaching through your campaign the younger folks who are not, again, they're not plugged into city council meetings. They're not living on the comment section of certain news sites. They're busy. They're running around. They're on TikTok more than anything else. How are you utilizing ways to reach those groups?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a tendency in politics in general, and especially here, to say, well, if people care, they'll come out to my event, right? They'll come to me. I don't think that's right at all. I mean, we've got to make sure, one, I mean, when I go doorbelling in my neighborhood, I'm knocking on doors. The number of people who look at me so confused and are like, you're the first person ever to knock on my door as a political candidate. Wow. So it makes a difference to show that ongoing, especially as a city councilor, how we can encourage engagement like that. Things in whatever the local green spaces are really important, whether that's at the local schools, whether that's at just block parties that you can host, whether those are at, little smaller parks that aren't in the bowl. There are things that we can do to make sure that we are engaging people in that way. I also look at, I'm probably going to get the exact person wrong, but there's a council member in Everett, I believe Reese, who has a really amazing newsletter that she sends out to her constituents that is just a brief thing in your inbox every month to say, here's what's happening, quick download. This is for the working people. This is for the people with families. This is for the people who just aren't the most politically engaged, whomever they might be. to keep people informed, just so that they know what's happening. And that type of community outreach is really important for engaging people.
Yeah. So this last piece of our conversation is going to be audience questions. So some of you that are watching, thank you so much for sending some. They were already kind of covered during the other conversation, so thank you very much. But there's a couple that I do want to share with you, Alex. And this one is from Roxy. And she wants to know, how do you envision the growth of Edmonds, increasing the tax base and the preservation of the marsh?
Yeah, I mean, those three things are part and parcel, as my family would say. They're pieces of a whole. First, I'm going to start from the last part and move backwards. Sure. Preservation of the marsh. We have the opportunity as the city of Edmonds to buy the Unocal property that is abutting the marsh right now. We have first right of refusal to purchase that property when it is safe for purchase, hopefully next year. That is going to be a really important thing to make sure that that is restored to ecological, preserved land that is going to bring back previously native species, that is going to be a huge expansion of the areas that make this a really unique estuary habitat that is important for all kinds of really nerdy scientific reasons and is really beautiful. So what that's going to do is also tied into how we're going to be able to increase different types of revenue through unique ways. When you have really unique pieces of ecological land, you're able to draw in more people who are going to come and visit, who are going to come and spend money in the area, who are going to increase the livelihood of the economy as a long-term strategy. So that is really a win-win for everybody to make sure that we are preserving the marsh, restoring the marsh, and using that to help us grow. Increasing the tax base is going to be making sure that the population of Edmonds doesn't shrink. What I think a lot of people don't realize is the population of Edmonds shrank last year. And not by a huge, huge amount, but, in my studies, I have learned, as looking across different societies, when you start to get declines in population levels, if you don't reverse that before a certain really important threshold, around a 3-4% decline year over year, you are running into a spiral of brain drain. And that is really dangerous for a city's finances, for public services, for anything that's going to go on in this area. We have to make sure that we are doing that. And a big piece of that is going to be to make sure that we have housing options that allow different people to come in and live in Edmonds. That's going to mean making sure that we have that hubs model that I keep coming back to, that allows for different types of housing like what we have in the bowl in different areas of the community. So that's what that looks like there is one way. And that's the growth of Edmonds, right? And increasing the tax base. So I hope that answers your question, Roxy. Thank you for the question.
And we have one from someone that's watching live. Let's see if I can make this happen. Here we go. So Toby Beach Baby wants to know, he's interested in learning or hearing what policy changes you want to accomplish and how you intend to get them passed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is going to be, I'm going to have to split it into two parts, really, because there's one universe in which the levy passes and we are in a much more financially stable place as a city, and there's another where it doesn't, and we got to make some really hard choices. If the levy passes, I want to make sure that we are doing a few things that really are just going to be stabilization to pre-cut levels. Not even to that full level still, because there was some unnecessary administrative bloat that was built into the budget there. But a couple of things that I would really want to focus on would be rebuilding the human services department, making sure that we are funding that to be able to tend to those residents who need the connections to the food banks, to the nearby sheltering places, to different organizations that are able to help people who are living on the edge right now is going to be a really important piece of it. And don't think they don't live in Edmonds, because they do. I see it in my line of work every day. They're everywhere. And they need support to make sure that it is not getting worse. And two, it's going to be making sure that we are funding and supporting comprehensive emergency management planning. That is something that if you think you can't afford, you really can't afford not to invest in. I've seen it level cities when their disasters strike. And that is not something that we can risk. Edmonds is at risk of landslides, of tsunamis, of train derailments, of toxic waste accidents, of, you know, even we didn't used to think wildfires in these urban areas, but wildfires too. It's very real. And we have, especially on even the west side of the state, increased wildfire risk this month that I am crossing my fingers for and knocking on wood constantly to avoid. Yeah. So those would be the two big things that I would want to make sure that we focus on if the levy passes. If it doesn't, it's going to be making sure that we are finding really creative ways to make sure that we are stabilizing the budget as it stands with a really, really limited resources. It's at that point, it's going to be all focused for me on making sure that our parks stay open. That's got to be the main thing that we've got to do to make sure we don't cut it back any further.
Nice. And probably this last question kind of dovetails a bit into that as well from Kevin. He wants to know, what vision do you have to reduce polarization and improve community engagement in Edmonds to help our decision makers improve policy making?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you for that, Kevin. As far as reducing polarization goes, it's about talking to people. I mean, you know, I understand, you know, it's no secret that I'm a Democrat. I don't make a secret of that at all. That doesn't mean that I don't have friends who aren't Democrats. That doesn't mean that I don't engage with people constantly across the political spectrum, both in my personal life and in my professional life. You know, I've dedicated my working life to a famously neutral organization that's there just to serve people. Mm-hmm. And regardless of, you know, political ideology, regardless of race, gender, what have you, anything, it's here to serve. And that's the type of ethos that I want to bring to the community to make sure that we're doing that. I think that starts with a lot more community discussions. I think that starts with reaching out to those areas that aren't plugged in to the community conversations. As I mentioned earlier, it's got a lot to do with making sure you have block parties in the right area that bring people out and bring people together. That's a really important thing. It starts at young ages too, making sure that we have after school programs, making sure we have community programs, things that bring out children and people of all ages to engage in community centers. The loss of third spaces is huge for the loss of community cohesion. And we need to make sure that we have different programs that make people talk to each other across political divides. Let me see, does that answer the question? I think so. Exactly, I rely on personal relationships for so much of those things. And yeah, that has gotten me pretty far up to this point.
So Alex, one last question for you before I hand it over to you for your final thoughts. You had a primary, so you were part of the two that got to move forward. Relatively close, depending on who you talk to. Plus, it's a primary, so not everyone comes out to vote as much as they would during the general. What happens should you not win? Does Alex disappear? What kind of, have you started to think about that? Like, what does your engagement level look like post-election should you not make it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a great question. No one's asked me that before. I appreciate it. I mean, the engagement level is going to be high. I mean, what am I going to do immediately? I'm going to congratulate my opponent and say, job well done. And, you know, thank you for running a good and honest race. And then it's going to be a matter of saying to her in that same phone call, this is my number. Call me. You know, I want us to have an ongoing dialogue here because the success of the city is in everyone's interest. And I think there are different groups that I can speak to that she can't. And I think that I want to be a resource for that. So, you know, if this election doesn't go my way, that's okay. I'm going to be here and I'm going to be fighting for the things that I believe in. And I'm really hoping that a lot more of those commissions come back online to be able to give people more opportunities to get involved. And I would love to, either way, I'm really excited to continue to be a part of all of this work. And I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Alice, I learned a lot from this conversation. It's the first time we have ever talked to each other.
Which is crazy. Yeah.
Right, exactly, right? So I was really looking forward to this. So no, I did not prep him for anything. Like this is literally the first time I've had a conversation with you. So thank you so much for doing this conversation with me, having it live streamed, having it for other people to come back and watch it later and hear directly from you. So with that, I will let you have the final words.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Alicia. I mean, this has just been a great way to connect. I really appreciate it. Like I said, my priorities in this race are three things. It's public safety, it's affordability, it's environmental protection. We are at a really important crossroads as a community right now in how we're going to get through this budget to make sure that we can live in line with our values. And those values being safe streets, making a community that's accessible to everybody, and making sure that we are preserving our public spaces, our public lands, to make it a beautiful place for generations to come. So I am really grateful for the support that I've gotten already in this community, especially from different environmentalist groups, especially from different organizations that just share my values. And I want everybody who's listening to know that whether or not you're one of those people, I welcome you on board. And if you're not, I still am going to be here to represent you on council.
Well, I can tell you there is life beyond election day, one way or the other. So Alex, thank you so much. I'm going to take you off screen now and say thank you everyone that watched us live and submitted questions, those who are going to watch later. My name is Alicia Crank, and tomorrow night we're doing another one, same bat time, same bat schedule, bat channel. And it's going to be with Chelsea Rudd, who is running for Port of Edmonds. So I hope to see some more of you there tomorrow. Take care.